What's up, guys? Welcome to Roensch Capital Charts. Today we're taking a look at Palantir stock, ticker symbol PLTR, on a variety of time frames in anticipation of the next trading day, Wednesday, April 17th. Okay, guys, Palantir stock here today down 2 cents per share. It's minus 0.09%. It's essentially a flat day. We actually faded quite a bit here in the pre-market and off the open. We basically spent the day recovering that, finishing essentially flat. We are up here about 12 cents in the after hours. Take it with a grain of salt. Volume is low, but it is the real price. Let's dive in here and start peeling back layers of the onion and pulling out all the bias we possibly can that we can't just get by looking at the chart. Okay, it helps us understand the movement today quite a bit better. Let's start by doing a volume profile analysis, just really quick. Here on the 5-minute chart. Listen, guys, by the way, Palantir, of course, as you should know by now, is a daily upload. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to the channel. My new goal is to hit 7,000, so I appreciate you doing so. I want to take a look at this move here. We came down and tested that 2130 technical and now psychological level. We respected that almost to a T and bounce. I want to take a look at that move. And I'm also going to take a quick look at this move, and we'll see if anything else sticks out like a sore thumb when we pull this up. All right, so listen, we held on to a little bit more volume than what is expected off the open. Usually we see a really quick fade. Okay, we held on to a little bit of bearish volume. So that tells us there's a small bearish bias, okay, compared to what is expected to be normal in terms of volume at that time of day. Heading into that 2130 test. And then upon the bounce, we see higher volume bar on the green candle, followed by a similar thing. Broken up by a lower volume red bar, and then two higher volume green candles yet again, which tells me that there is also a bullish bias outside of what is contextual for that time of day on the bounce away from 2130. So really those two kind of cancel each other out and end up essentially a net neutral. Now, a lot of you are looking at this and you're like, well, the bullish volume is lower than the bearish volume. You have to understand that that's what we expect. We expect a fade in volume anyway as the day goes on. So you have to look at what is contextual. You can't look at the volume profile literally. Otherwise, you start getting false positives. As we move on here, you see a couple of pops. Those are potentially fooled by randomness bars, and there are some wicks on some of those bars anyway. So I like to usually ignore those unless we see a cluster. In this move that we circled now, we start seeing very low volume. And then it ramps up, and it gets a little bit out of context on these 3 consecutive red bars. That tells me that there's a little bit of obvious bearish bias on the fade after that little bit of pop that we had, right? So it's there, it's slight, but it's there. And then heading into the close, very contextual close, ramping up into the close. All right, let's move on now to the psychological and self-fulfilling prophecy levels that we should be paying attention to that are likely to influence price movement here from a psychology standpoint, starting with the 30-minute chart. Now, you guys remember yesterday's Palantir video, we gave up both the 50 period and the 200 period on the 30 minute. We gave them up hard. Now, the 50 period continued downside as expected yesterday. All right. We kind of tested at midday and sort of got rejected, more so just turned into a consolidation sideways as we came into that level. We've reclaimed it now in the after hours, but listen, that's on very low volume. I don't look at those as definitive reclaims. I'm interested to see how we do here off the open tomorrow, or more so just the intraday session in general. So listen, bulls, tomorrow, if we see a retest of the 50 period on the 30 minute, I don't care what volume we retest that at, as long as we get a high volume bounce away. I'd be very happy with that. That sets you guys up for potentially making an upside test. That 200 period is kind of like the next checkpoint on the 30 minute, right? Bears, you don't want to get that far, right? You bears just want to reclaim this 50 period back to the downside, ideally breaking back downside and holding on as much volume as possible. All right, the 4 hour, let's take a look. You can see here, yesterday we rejected pretty hard away from that 50 period here on the 4 hour. Remember, this is a slower moving average, so it's getting yanked down, but not at a super aggressive pace. Bulls, you wouldn't want that coming down at a really aggressive pace, because that's just another psychological barrier that's lower and lower that we'd have to reclaim, throws kind of a wrench into the mix to get any higher, right? Whereas bears, you guys want that thing moving downside as quickly as possible because you want lower and lower and lower psychological barriers of resistance as the stock falls, right? It makes it that much more difficult to get back upside. Whereas bulls, you want that thing flattening out, the 50 period that is, the white line, right? As flat as possible to give us some time to get back up toward 2250 and make an honest attempt at a reclaim of that. So really simple here on the 4-hour. Okay, let's take a look at the daily, guys. The daily is like the biggest story here, especially on Palantir. If we take a look, actually zoom in a little bit more. Here on the daily, today we made a hard test, as stated earlier, of the bottom side of this channel. Right now, guys, the obvious channel that everyone's paying attention to, at least I am, and it's so obvious that I think there's a lot of other people drawing the same lines, especially after today. That self-fulfilling prophecy mentality, right? That's really all I'm looking at. 2130 to 23 is the obvious channel on Palantir right now. Okay, today we held 2130 as a support level. We tested it and held it almost to a T. It was relatively clean. So listen, bulls, any downside test of that tomorrow, again, I want to see that hold as support. Whereas bears, you guys want to turn that support into resistance. Okay, what does that take? A downside break of 2130 on big volume. Ideally, you want to see confirmation after that. So a low volume retest and then a high volume confirmation. Whereas bulls, if we see a test, you want to see that hold on big volume. I don't care what it tests on as long as it holds on high volume to help us make our way back up to 23 and break out of this channel. After we break out of that channel, then we have to deal with that 50-day moving average. Whereas bears, you guys have kind of open C down to like that psychological round number of 20. All right, implied volatility here compared to the last month or so, it is sitting high, guys. Just understand that if you're buying new options right now, you're running a slightly elevated risk of IV crush if we see IV start to curl back downside toward that equilibrium point, at least, compared to the last month or two. Now, expected move here on Palantir. Let's take a look. The next expiration we have is at Friday's close. The expected move by Friday's close from today's close is plus or minus 90 cents per share. Okay, there's no earnings or anything in between now and then. So if we divide that by 3 trading days, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, that gives us plus or minus 30 cents per share. But I want to add 50% back to that. That's what I'm doing in this market to make up for the fact that 30 cents per share assumes 3 green days in a row or 3 red days in a row. So I add 50% to that. And that gives us a volatility expectation of plus or minus 45 cents per share approximately by tomorrow, Wednesday's close compared to today's close. So again, that's not a directional bias. That's a volatility bias. Okay, and that helps out tremendously when you're trying to position yourself, especially utilizing options, since volatility goes into the pricing of the contracts. If you're not yet considering volatility, implied volatility, the expected move when you're trading especially options, I think you need to study the Greeks. Understand Vega, right? Especially, it's a huge factor that goes overlooked by so many traders. And with options, I really think that you're leaving what could be a huge advantage on the table. You're playing with like half blind. I mean, why do that? It's really not that difficult to understand. Take a weekend, learn all the Greeks. I promise you'll thank yourself. All right, now, directional bias. All right, 206,000 option contracts were traded today. 138,000 of those were calls and 68,000 were puts. So we're seeing a heavy bullish bias on the overall ratio. And if we go one step further and break that down into the short-term speculators only, okay, or at least on average, right, which is the 0 to 20 delta range, those short-term bets being placed, 50,000 calls today, about 18,000 puts. So listen, we are seeing a heavy call side bias in Palantir today on the overall and out of the short-term speculators. Listen, guys, if you want to get my in-play stock alerts every single day, we sent out one today. The stock got alerted at $4.21, and within an hour, it hit a high of over $8 a share. A lot of trading opportunities on that one. And, the FOMO really kicked in. If you want to get those alerts, every tier level gets them. We, of course, have Gold, Gold Plus UOA, and then, I'm working with my Platinum members one-on-one every single day. They, of course, get access to all the alerts. You guys can look to join at that link in the pinned comment. If you get value out of these videos, let me know in the comment section. I appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next one.